Thank you so much for joining me. Oh gosh, I cannot wait to talk to you because this is such an important subject. You focus on keeping children safe from abuse, and this is in part because you've been through, as a parent, what it can be like. And one thing that's always struck me from your experience is how parents can be groomed as well as children. So this is something I do want to talk to you about. But tell me a little bit first about your active campaigning work and the training that you offer, please.
Well, thank you, Audrey. Lovely to see you again. Well, we go all over the country. I am forever banging on endlessly on media. It doesn't matter how good your policies or your procedures or what they are. I was the deputy head, and the guy who abused my 3 sons was a paedophile. And as a deputy head, I didn't know what grooming was. And I'm telling you now, Audrey, so many schools still don't. And we're not talking about abduction here. I go into prisons before COVID and I speak to people. I wanted to understand, why does someone do this? And how do they operate? And of course, it starts with befriending and getting the trust of the people that are surrounding that child. You're not going to go start straight away and grooming that child. You've already got it on your eye line and you're already choosing the adults. So in a school situation, very often they will groom 2 or 3 adults, staff around them. So if there was an inquiry, they've got a little posse of people that say, well, he was absolutely fine. He took me or she took me down the pub and nothing happened. So they're very, very sharp. This is A-class, duplicitous con.
It's horrendously insidious. And the thing is, because I want to ask you about what we can look out for. I know it's very difficult because of this little circle of support that groomers can create. But you see so many romance scams. You see things like that happen all the time. And this is adults here we're talking about. So anything that we can learn from you to protect our children, we can actually learn to protect ourselves as well. So what are the sort of things, as well as building this little support network around them?
The first thing they're looking for, I mean, when I've gone into the prisons, they will smile at me and say, we smell vulnerability like French perfume. We study, here's another quote, the micro movements in a child's behavior so we can actually, assess vulnerability. This is a blueprint plan. Now, if you are vulnerable, I was vulnerable, I was going through a divorce. If you're single, you're vulnerable. If you're in a situation where your spouse is away a lot with their job, maybe they have to go abroad, maybe they're a pilot, maybe they have to do consultancy abroad and away out of the country. So you're struggling as a lone parent. And this person has been watching and starting to chat to you and starts inveigling their way into your close friendship group. This can take 3 or 4 years. We're not talking online here. And this is what gets me about online grooming. Yes, it is a perfect storm, but you are still more likely the enemy in your front room, in your the person who you have trusted for many, many years, who was sat there waiting in the wings. Like my marriage, I was still with my husband, but these people are sharp. He could see that I was the one that was carrying most of the responsibility and most of the parenting. It wasn't equal. If you are parents that are really together in it like this, like that, and you're able to because you spend more time around yourselves and the child, that's difficult to infiltrate.
But if there is that gap in the armor, then that's where they go in. And actually with that, I think that's really important to highlight. It's a long game. It's a long time that this takes. And it's not what we almost in some ways assume. It just happens immediately. And so that's something else that we need to be mindful of, isn't it?
The thing also, Audrey, what they do, this is what they've told me in the prison, is that there has an end game. It's like a video running through their mind. There's the start. They imagine how they're going to do it. And that plays like a video in their mind. until the time comes. Now, they really like the grooming because this is all about power, control, and silence, right? So they're not going to choose a child that's going like this all the time, gobby, 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 going to tell mummy. They select the sort of child they like. Maybe in my case, it was fair-haired boys with blue eyes, right? Maybe it's long-haired girls with ponytails, and you know what I mean? And they've got that in their eye line, but they are, as I say, looking for that vulnerability, and it's a slowly catchy monkey. You know, they're tested. So, for example, they might say one day, "Oh, Audrey, you're a bit busy doing your stuff tonight. So I'll tell you what, why don't I bring the kids home for you?" And first time, nothing happens.
They'll bring them home, won't they? They'll just do what they said.
Exactly. Then the next time, maybe I'll stop at the sweet shop and I go, "Look, I know Mum's going to go mad, so don't tell her, but I'm going to get you some Haribo. But you know what, don't tell her, you know what she's like? Oh my God. You'll ruin it. We'll ruin it. I won't be able to buy you little treats." So they come home, and then the next time I see the kids, or next time I see you, I will say, "Oh, Audrey, I hate having secrets. I'm really, I bet they've dobbed me in it, haven't they?" And you'll go,
I bought the. Oh my goodness! It's so systematic,
yeah,
isn't it? They've got it planned, and with that, because a lot of people, parents, you were a deputy head.
Yeah.
You will pride yourself on, I have safeguarding regulations. I'm an intelligent person here. But it's so emotional, isn't it? It's that slowly building up the trust and then almost giving you that in of, "Oh, I broke your trust, but here I'm telling you about it." So is this quite a common pattern?
Oh, yeah. They're testing all the time. They need to be a squealer. Because if I had said to your child, "Don't tell mummy," and then a week's time I say, "Oh, Audrey, I can't have a secret from you," and you go, "Yes, you are naughty, Jamie told me," I've got a problem. Because Jamie is now a squealer. I can't trust him to do stuff because he's going to tell you. So now I will pull back on how I am supporting you with Jamie. And then I'll do another one. So I'll have several on the go. I mean, I'm not just going to do it with one. I'll have maybe other options that, "Oh, Jamie's a squealer. I wonder if Sam is."
Yes. This is horrendous. It's absolutely awful. Now you educate people in this procedure to what to look out for, but also you are yourself a groomed survivor. You've been through it. How do you help people in your position as well to get over that sense of guilt and that, or at least manage it? I guess you never lose it.
The guilt, I would say, it took me 7 years. I had a breakdown. I tried to take my own life. And that's another thing. I always find it harsh when people say, "Oh, that person was so selfish." No, they weren't. They were mentally ill. When I tried to take my own life, I felt I was doing the best favor ever for my family, because I had met this rogue man who had, who I befriended, and, he harmed my children. And I felt that I had tied them up in wrapping paper and ribbon and gave them to a paedophile. I felt horrific, and the shock was dreadful. I mean, I wrote a book because it took me so long to find any therapist that could understand me. I mean, I had about 8 that, one told me, "Oh, ask me how did it feel." Well, use your imagination. How do you think it feels? I got up and walked out. Another therapist burst into tears when she knew. I got up and walked out. Another one said to me, "Oh, I only normally do divorce. Child sexual abuse, that's different." So I got up and walked out of that one. And so it went on. And in the end, I wrote a book. I thought, I want to go through all the emotions. And my book is called Never Take No for an Answer. Because I would not shut up. The police told me when he walked away from the court, when he finally went to court, they finally arrested him. He finally said he was guilty. I had a complete meltdown. I couldn't believe it, because for a long time I was still blaming the police. I thought, they've got it wrong. They've got it wrong. This cannot be my friend, my savior, who helped me when I was homeless. He can't be, surely. And then boom, it was. And then when he got to the Crown Court, he said he was guilty, and he walked away with a £200 fine.
Oh my goodness. I'm just speaking that you are, I can feel the emotions that are still there. I can see how painful this whole experience was. And then to see that sort of outcome, I mean, at least he went to court, but that's nothing, is it, compared to the scars that have been left behind?
It was dreadful. I mean, you can't change your past. I mean, I went to see a psychiatrist in the end, and I mean, I had so many useless therapists, really, really, truly. And I did find writing my book cathartic, because I start off with the day I met the paedophile, and it was in church. He sat behind me, and my little boy, who's now 42, he was 2 years old at the time, and I was pregnant with my daughter, and the twins, who he was yet to abuse, hadn't even been conceived. And it was clearly obvious that my husband was nothing more than a child himself. So tap, tap on the shoulder, I turn around and he goes, "What a lovely little boy. Where's he going to go to school?" And I said, "I've got no idea. He's only 2. He said, "I'm the new head teacher here. It's a Church of England school. I suspect you'll want a man on the staff, won't you? Because you've got a little boy." So I'm not even thinking about it. I've got to give birth to this one yet. So when Nicky was born, after about 6 weeks, we went to see him. I can still see him kneeling down in front of the gerbil cage with his friend Christopher going, "Now, see, we have lots of little animals here. We have hamsters as well." And I thought, what a lovely man. What a lovely man. I must send my children to this school. And then the friendship developed. He was always there. Even, you know, it was always have a coffee after the church service. And I always noticed that the school children would come, they'd come and climb all over him like he was the Pied Piper. I hadn't got a clue. I mean, oh goodness, I was so naive. And I hate to say, Audrey, people are still naive today. So naive. You've only got to look at what happened. Well, it's the Catholic Church as well. But the recent reports from the ICSA inquiry, the independent inquiry, with the hundreds and hundreds that are still fresh cases.
But this is why we need to have these conversations. So when your children, how did you find out what was going on, and then what happened through that process?
Terrible accident on her gap year in Australia, and I was over there. She had lost a kidney in a boating accident, and I was there. We stayed weeks with her. I stayed for weeks with her, and I got this phone call from a very close friend who was the school secretary. And she said, "When are you coming back? Because I've had a message from the police. They're trying to contact you." I went, "Why?" So she said, "Well, honestly, I don't know. But do you know when you'll be coming back?" I said, "I don't know, probably late August, because Nicky's got to start university." So sure enough, we came back late August. 2 weeks later, the police were on my doorstep from Thames Valley. Me and my new husband had then moved to Sussex, and Thames Valley police had to get permission from the Sussex police to come and, you know, into their patch. Anyway, they arrived at 9 in the morning, and they said they'd like the boys to be home, you know, not to do after school activities like rugby or anything like that. Oh, okay, fine. And, you know, anyway, they started to tell me about, they were investigating my friend Jeff Carney. His name's all over the internet. It's public domain information. And they were interviewing him for paedophilia. I went, "I beg your pardon? What?" And then I said, "Get out my house. You're abusing me. This man saved my life, blah, blah, blah." And there were 2 officers, and one was a very, very lovely child protection lady officer. And she said, "Have you ever heard of grooming?" I went, "Well, not unless you're doing it to a horse, no." And she said, "You don't understand what grooming is." I said, "Look, I've been on all the safeguarding courses I could have gone on with him." And I said, "And we never, ever touched on grooming. I haven't got a clue what you're talking about." So she started talking about this kind of romance. And she said, and it takes a long time. So she said, "Imagine that you were going to paint the walls of a room, and you weren't going to rub down the paintwork, and you weren't going to fill up the cracks, and you weren't going to sand it down, and you weren't going to prime it. You were just going to slap on the paint because you wanted to do a quick job. What's going to happen?" I said, "Well, all the paint will peel off." Exactly. That's why it takes so long, because they've got to prepare everybody in your family, in your friendship group, the child, and they are watching in the wings all the time for the person that might think they're a bit odd. And challenge that person and try and get them on board as well.
So I know your book will cover these elements, and that's great. I'll ask you to give the title again as we get towards the end. But I wanted to also ask, you struggled hard to get yourself professional intervention, because you're absolutely right. Not everybody understands this. And if you find a therapist who you just don't have that rapport with, you can find another therapist, even though it is difficult. There is a waiting list. Services are overwhelmed. What about the children involved? What has helped them come to terms with everything and be able to start the healing process?
They were young, and I believed them. And that so many mothers won't believe their children. If it's their father, if it's the uncle, if it's the brother, even if it's the best friend, I believe them. However hard it was, I believed them. And when he walked free from the court, and the police told me, they phoned me because the doctors wouldn't, I was on such medication, the doctors wouldn't let me go to the court. And they said, we knew he'd walk away because the judge keeps doing this. He lets people off that have done this. I was furious. I literally went to a garden centre and I bought a set of lobbers, right? I went right round my garden the next day. I chopped every twig and branch that could resemble an erect penis. And when my children came home, there was no garden. I honestly, Audrey, I have never known anger like it. It's frightening. It's frightening. I realized until that point that all the anger I had felt was actually frustration. It was, ooh, I can't get my own way. Ooh, that's frustrating. This anger was like a white heat burning into my soul. It was dreadful. It was actually really very damaging. And the only reason I went to a psychiatrist in the end was we were at a dinner party. It's all in the book. We were at a dinner party and he was an off-duty police officer. There were about 8 of us people there at the neighbour's house. And I just went to the cloakroom and he was waiting outside in the hall and he'd been asking me about the case because it had all been in the papers. He said to me, so how are you? I went, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. He said, you're not fine. He said, this is my job. I do this all the time. I've seen what it does to mothers. You're not fine. And if I think what you're thinking, you're worth more than he is. Do not think about taking your life. I panicked. And he said, I'm going to tell your husband. I said, you don't even know me. I picked my handbag up and I ran out the house and I didn't stay for the dinner. I literally sat on the pavement underneath this street lamp out my side, my front door. And I cried like a baby. I thought, I knew I was going to take my own life on the Tuesday. I knew they were all going to be at school or away. I thought, I only know how to die. I don't know how to live. How am I going to live with this monster, this monstrous thing that's happened to me, like a tsunami coming into our lives? And, you know, the boys were young as well. They were like 16 and my eldest one was 20. And they'd been brought up. They were very resilient, grounded, great attachment kids. I was, you know, anyway, he did tell my husband. And my husband went round looking for all sorts of things like bottles of whiskey, Panadol and all of that, which he found. And then he took me off to a psychiatrist. And this guy was Canadian. And I thought he was brutal, but it was the point at which I turned round. I can't do the accent, but he said, so what do you want? I said, I want my life back. He said, you can't have it back. I said, but I want my life back. The life I had was a mum of 4 kids with a puppy and I was teaching. You can't have that back. It's gone. And I said, well, where do I start? I'm completely lost. And he said, right, you can't turn the clock back. It's happened. You can only change today and tomorrow. And you can. I said, but I don't know where to start. He said, right, okay. And he never even charged me. He said to me, you're stronger than you think because you would have gone ahead and done what you were threatening to do. I said, you don't know that. And I said, and I don't like your tone. Anyway, he carried on and he said, I want you. She said, what's happened here? He said, this man threw you out of an aircraft at 40,000 feet without a parachute. Now, he said, what's happened is you've just gone splat on the pavement. Now, if that had been your bones, you'd have a plaster cast from the neck down in a wheelchair and everybody would be asking how you are and trying to help you. That's what's happened to you on the inside and no one can see it. So he said, what I want you to do in there, in that mess, is part of your DNA that is still there. And I want you to think about 3 things that were the essence of Marilyn before she was 7. And I went, oh, that's easy. And he said, what then? I said, animals, nature and music. He said, there you go, stop there. Stop there. That is enough to pin everything on. He said, get a puppy, because that will teach you unconditional love again and trust. It will make you go out, because I'd become agoraphobic. It will make you go out, and you will be going for walks in the countryside, and then go back to playing the piano again, because I was a music teacher, you see. Go back. Just stay there, stop there, do nothing more, and watch yourself slowly, slowly heal. You'll get black days, you'll get pink days, but slowly, slowly, slowly move forward. And that's what I did.
You see, that's so powerful. And I think that advice is something that will help anybody listening to this who feels exactly like that, and also can't show it because it's not on the outside. So I'm so grateful to you for saying that. And you continue your campaigning work, don't you? You are hosting a conference, and this is in the wake of the tragic death of Molly Russell, where she was effectively, in some ways, by an algorithm groomed online.
Algorithms, this is what the parents don't understand, and this is what I'm talking about. Like, and I give an example. How do algorithms work? They send the kids down a rabbit hole, basically. Can't get out. So I'm currently in one with the royal family. Okay, so when the Queen passed away, I was like, you know, I quite like the Queen, and I like all the diamonds. I like seeing all that stuff, right? So I started, like, on the day of the funeral, putting stuff in, you know, into my phone, and of course I only did it 5 or 6 times, but I can't get away from the royal family. I keep being sent all these news feeds about what earrings the Princess of Wales is wearing, and I haven't looked for the royal family since the funeral. So it's got to take a time for it to throttle back. And that's what would happen to Molly. She had 2,000 videos on Pinterest. There's no way she found 2,000. They would have been feeding it to her. And that is the trouble. And that is what these tech companies could be doing. They could change the algorithms. And I saw, before I came on air, that, thank goodness, Instagram today has taken away all 6,000 porn sites. And it's taken away about something like 30 million people. That has to happen for every single app, because the infiltration of pornography that is sitting behind a lot of the games as well. OnlyFans, dreadful. So, you know, Discord, another one, awful. So we've got really, I've called the name The Game's Up. So it's like, haha, we know the background of all these apps and social media things now. So we've got Jim Gamble, who, oh, I love Jim. He started CEOP, Child Exploitation Online. He is going to be talking about metaverse. We've got Gail Dines from America talking about what goes on behind OnlyFans, which is absolutely vomit making. And then Discord, we've got someone talking about the online safety bill. We've got someone talking about gambling addiction. We've also got a lawyer at the very end who actually helped with the team of, because Lee Day actually represented the Russell family, and she'll be talking as well. So it's all funded. It's the 5th conference we've done with Lee Day, and I'm so proud to do it. But what is also imminently coming out is the ICSA inquiry. As you know, we've had the release of the Church of England churches, right? I've been putting out, I don't know if you saw it, I've been putting out, intellectual people, intelligent people mitigate risk. Are you intelligent enough to face up and learn about grooming? Because if not, you're daft, because it could be happening. It may already have happened in your living room. I didn't know until my sister was 65 that my uncle had raped her for 4 years. I have no idea how he did it. In our house, when the family were there, I have no idea how he did it. They are so vile. And, you know, silenced. Shh, our little secret. Shh, you're dirty, you won't be believed. Shh, mummy will die. You know, that's why people don't tell. It can take 22 years for someone who's been abused to speak. I mean, I don't think my boys would ever have done. I really don't. I think it's only the fact that the police turned up, that we had that conversation. And then one of the boys actually gave a whole list of other boys that he thought, because he He, at 12, 11 years old, was being used to procure his friends.
This is actually quite a common grooming scheme. Bernardo's has done a video on this known as the chicken shop grooming scheme, where children are used to recruit other children. But the thing is, you were abused as well. You were part of this circle of abuse, and it is horrendous. Now, just before, I'd like you to give me the details to join the conference, if that's okay, please. So we've got that, and then if you don't mind giving me your book again as well, so we can go and read this.
I did put it out on Twitter yesterday, but they can email me, and I can send them the link and the actual flyer. And my email is Marilyn, MARILYN .Hawes HAWES at freedom-abuse.org. It's on LinkedIn. I put it out on Twitter last night, and it's there. But what I'm also going to be doing, I'm going to write an article for an education group I've been asked to write today, because I am hoping that we get mandatory reporting. Now, if we get mandatory reporting on the ICSA inquiry, no point going for statutory guidance. Statutory guidance is not law. Statutory guidance. So if you're a teacher in my school and I say, oh, Audrey, if you ever saw anything, I expect you to report it. If you decide you're not going to, nothing's going to happen. You might get at risk, but nothing else. We need mandatory reporting, and that is what is going to make people step up and take notice about grooming. Because what Alexis J has said about what's going on in schools, failure, 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 failure. And she ends it with, now this is willfully. Now that is a strong word. Willful means deliberate. 3 words she uses to sum up: willfully ignored reality. That is a choice. It doesn't say, oh, willful means you deliberately ignored it. You have no right to be involved in a school around children if you willfully ignore the reality of grooming and abuse. And it will still be happening now, Audrey, as we speak.
Yes. No, absolutely. And that is also because people, maybe some people are too busy to really recognize things that are going on. There are a lot of systemic failures that can cause these sorts of issues. But of course, when you talk about the planning that a groomer goes through, there's an added extra thing that you have to actually contend with. But on that note, I wanted to ask you, you had a lot of positive intervention as well, and arguably the behaviors will be quite similar to the groomers. So how do you tell the difference? Is that possible?
I do use my instinct. I think your instinct. So, you know, I have a checklist of grooming behaviors that actually came from somebody who was actually responsible for Ian Huntley. You know, we have a problem also that you can change your name. Ian Huntley was not Ian Huntley. In another world, he was Ian Nixon, and he had a string load of offences. Colin Pitchfork, who murdered 2 teenage girls, he had changed his name in prison when he came out last year or the year before. He was David Thorpe. Now, that has to stop. You should not be able to change your name if you are a sex offender or a child abuser, because the jury's out on this, but I think you've got to go some to be able to change that person. And what we should be doing is much more in the early years, those behaviors that can be seen as overly sexualized in a young child of 5 or 7 or 8, mentor that child before it becomes anything else. And that's what's not happened. People are not digging down and doing what they should be doing. Now, funnily enough, I spoke to a Lord High Sheriff the other day, and they're appointed by the Queen. And they said to me, well, I think the trouble is it's so rife in schools, in boarding schools and schools generally, people just think, I don't want to open the can of worms, which is true.
But then I would always ask, how many more panoramas do we need on this? That's the issue, because it's one of those things where if you are closing your eyes to it, it will be found out. But unfortunately, not soon enough.
I think also you need to listen to other people, because if you're the person who's being groomed. So I was vulnerable. I was in a domestic abuse situation. I had a husband who was always shouting and swearing at me. So nice, gentle, kind Jeff, who didn't want anything from me other than my company, I didn't know he wanted my boys, was very gentle, very considerate. And oh my word, I mean, why wouldn't I want to be his friend? You know what I mean? And other people, a couple of friends said to me, one in particular said to me when she saw him around my boys and my home after I got divorced, She said to me, is he okay? I said, what do you mean, is he okay? She said, he's overly friendly with your boys. And I went, oh, don't be ridiculous. She said, well, I've set it, I've laid it out there. And then my husband, Roger, who I'd been married to 2 years at that time, he had been abused at school himself. And he used to say to me, he's not interested in you, Maz. He never was. He's interested in your boys. And that caused rows because I said, don't you start that. He was my saviour. He was my guardian. He said, of course, there we are. He was right. Use your instinct. That feeling. It. You know, I say, like, you get in a lift with somebody, and a man might say to you, "Hey, you want to come down for a bar? Do you want to come down for a drink?" And you go, "Yeah, right, why not?" Somebody else says exactly the same thing, and you think, "Not on your Nelly. I can't wait to get out the lift." Do you know what I mean? There's something about someone that gets your spines crawling. And that's when you need to say, hang on a minute, why am I feeling that?
And that's really important, but also what you said, and this relates to how you supported your children as well, is listening to other people. Because when we are desperate, when we are in that painful place ourselves for whatever reason, we often dampen those instincts because we are so desperate to be supported. And so when other people say something to you who have no agenda at all to say them, so yeah, ex-husband question mark, but friend, she was doing it for your own good. And then what you say about you believed your boys, that is so important. It's just putting that out there without the agenda and saying to somebody, I don't think that's right, and there I've said it, because that can be one of the hardest things to do.
You know, it does cost you stuff. People think this is like German measles. You know, I can turn the aircon in when I go to a party. People say, what do you do? I just say, oh, I now say I'm retired, because I have seen people walk away from me. I have gone to churches when people think they know what I do. They don't talk to me anymore. People think it's contagious. I've got friends, well, they're not from my children said to me, well, they weren't your friends, were they, Mum? That walked away with me. My family walked away from me. My maternal family still have nothing to do with me unless I give up what I'm doing.
Oh, I'm so sad that we cannot turn a blind eye any longer. So once more, Marilyn, please, your books, your email, and the conference. Where can we learn more, please?
Never Take No for an Answer by Marilyn Hawes. It's not like War and Peace. It's quite easy, but it takes you through the basic raw emotions that I went through. And the last one was guilt. I never lost that guilt until all my children got married and had children. So that's only in the last 4 years. So that has taken guilt, oh my word, for something like 16 years. I live with that guilt, always worrying, always worrying. So there's that. The conference is called The Game Is Up. You can get it. Please, by all means, contact me on Marilyn, MARILYN .Hawes, HAWES freedom-abuse.org. It is free to attend. It's on the 10th of November. It's online, 10 a.m. in the morning till 1:30. Please, if you're a granny, if you're whatever, if you're a teacher, whatever, whoever you are, children only have us to save them. And I would just say this, to the thing that would permanently go through my brain that kept me going through this was, it's a sort of prayer, but it's grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that helped me enormously.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Marilyn. This has been tragically enlightening, because it's so important, and yet we don't talk about it enough. I do hope you'll join me again and we can talk more, because I think this is so important.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, Audrey. Real pleasure.